All right. Well, let's try and go for it. Good morning. How are you all today?
Good.
I'm Dave Arbaugh, and I'm going to be working with you this year. I had the pleasure of working with this class last year, although I don't know if any of you were in it. I'm hoping that we can continue our efforts and give you guys a good chance to see what the state legislature is really all about. How many of you have spent any time in Olympia or been to the state capitol before? I see a few hands. That's great. How much interest do you have in the legislature? Do you know any of your own legislators from up around where you live? I'm not seeing many hands on that one.
Vincent Buys. I know Vincent. You guys know anybody else?
Like Luann
Van Werven, and our senator from our little area in the state legislature is Doug Erickson.
that guy. Dougie boy.
So, who can tell me how many members there are in the state House of Representatives?
I know how many are in the Senate.
They have no idea.
Wait, we could guess.
Wait. Is that based on how many districts? So,
How many districts you think we have?
We have 10.
Wait, is that what
We have
we
way
were
more than
talking
10.
about the other day?
These
It's
are
like
Washington state legislatures. So how many districts do you think our state has?
15,
I say it's 16 to 26.
Could be a whole lot more than that.
32 total.
38.
37, 49.
52.
38.
Yeah.
Close. There are 39 counties, but there are 49 legislative districts in this state. And each legislative district has 2 members in the state house and 1 member in the state senate. So that makes a total of 98 house members and 49 senate members. So, and they break down in a lot of different ways. You have people here from all walks of life. You have attorneys, and you have, just regular folks, retired people. There's nothing particularly unique or special about some of them, other than they have a strong interest in doing what they can to help move the state along and advancing policies that they're interested in. Of the Senate members, the 98 people that serve in the House, there are I counted this up today, 36 of them are women. And in the Senate, 49 total members, 17 of them are women. And the breakdown between parties is pretty close in the Senate, 9 Democrats and 8 Republicans. In the House, 26 of the women are Democrats and only 10 are Republicans. But you have about 37% of the legislative population is female. It's much better than a lot of other states in terms of getting an even balance. We have, in this state, we have 30 brand new legislators that were just elected in November. And they took their oath of office about 2 weeks ago and are already busy doing what they do here. What can you tell me about what the job of a legislator is?
Somebody should be able to handle that a little bit.
Pass legislation. Yeah. Make policies. Pass legislation.
Right. So it's not too dissimilar from being in Congress, say. Are you more familiar with what happens in Congress? Congress is another form of a legislature. Just have representatives from all across the country rather than just representatives from all across the state.
No Congress.
And so what happens when an idea is presented to a legislator? Does anybody have a sense if that legislator decides they want to do something to promote this idea, what happens next?
Try, say it loud, you guys.
Would they write a bill?
They write a bill, exactly.
Nice.
Go.
Nice going. I only see about half of your face, I think, but nice. We have to get a wider camera up there.
Get Riley in here.
In the process of, oh, that's better, yeah. In the process of running a bill, there are people that also work on those things. So who can identify some of the other players in the legislative process?
Come on.
You have legislators. Who else is down here?
Lobbyists.
You have lobbyists, right? Anybody else?
Staff.
Staff, right. Those are probably the three groups that you'll interact with most in this environment. So tell me what the role of a lobbyist is.
Push for policies that they support.
Yeah, inform legislators about issues and policies and kind of promote certain policies.
Right, but usually, not always on behalf of their own self, usually on behalf of an organization that employs them or retains them under contract, or they might volunteer. So that's what I do, and I have a little bit of I'll walk through my client list and give you a sense of who I represent. It changes every year a little bit. This year, my clients include 2 public utility districts, or PUDs. Anybody know what a PUD is? I think you have a small one up in Whatcom County that serves some industrial customers. My PUD clients are Chelan County PUD and Snohomish County PUD. And their interests are related to generation of electricity. Chelan PUD has 3 hydroelectric projects. Snohomish PUD doesn't have quite so much generation capacity, but they are Bonneville Power's largest customer and are very closely watching Bonneville issues and issues related to conservation requirements and energy portfolio standards, things like that. I also represent the city of Richland. Richland has a general purpose government, just like any other city would have. They pay attention to public records issues, sometimes funding issues. Last year, or 2 years ago rather, I worked on a transportation funding measure for them to include money for a bridge and a big transportation budget that was approved after many, many years of effort. Let's see, I volunteer to represent an organization called Heritage Park, which represents a part of Capitol Campus down here. Those of you that have visited might recall there's a lake just north of the state Capitol building called Capitol Lake. And there's a park around that lake, and the legislature has funded efforts to fix up that park, but there is about $1 million or $1.5 million worth of work that remains to be done. So what I'm trying to do is help those guys get some money in the state capital budget to fund this final stage of work for Heritage Park. Then I also do some work, just not advocating for clients, but just watching what goes on around here for another utility in Mason County and for a group of a risk pool of public utilities. So I guess I'm sort of focused on energy and utility work. There are 2 kinds of lobbyists. I am a contract lobbyist, And the other type of a lobbyist is a in-house lobbyist. They're an employee of the organization that they represent. So, for example, Weyerhaeuser has people that are employees that work down here, and the only issues those guys work on are Weyerhaeuser issues. They don't do contract work for anybody else. Most of the lobbyists I work with are contractors, though, so not dissimilar to lawyers that might take on work or cases for a variety of clients. It's kind of the same sort of thing. I'm not a lawyer. I started out as an intern in college in the down here in Olympia, and I just never left. I thought it was a lot of fun. So I worked for a labor organization of classified school employees early in my career. I spent about 7 years working for a group called Public School Employees of Washington. And that got frustrating to me because it was all working on appropriation stuff. We were just asking for money to have the state drive money out to school districts. And then the way it works here, the school districts and the labor groups, the employee groups, negotiate over wages and working conditions and whatnot. So there's never enough to make everybody happy, and that gets tiresome after a while. So I moved on to start doing some utility work down with an association of utilities in 1990. So I've been around Olympia my entire career, I guess is what I'm saying. What I would like to do with you all this year is similar to what we did last year. I would like to ask you to help identify some things that are interesting to you that we can watch and maybe work on in the next month or months. This is supposed to be a long legislative session. Legislature's main job is to pass a budget. And a budget in the state is a 2-year budget called a biennial budget. The state operating budget for Washington is about $42 billion for that 2-year span. And I'm pretty sure you've heard of some of the challenges. One of the biggest challenges that the legislature faces is fully funding education. So that's one thing that might be something you all want to work on. Last year, the class I worked with last year worked on voter pre-registration issue, and we actually made some progress on that, although ultimately the bill did not get through the process. The legislators we worked with are already at it again. They've introduced a bill. Representative Berquist has introduced his bill again. Secretary of State, who we worked with last year, was reelected and is introducing a similar kind of pre-registration bill. So that's a possibility if that's something you want to pursue. But I'm sort of looking to you to identify what's interesting to you, because there isn't. Because I'm here to try to represent your interests and teach you about this process as we go along. So how many of you have spent any time, or have you spent any time looking at what's been introduced and what's going on down here so far this session?
Yeah, so I did, hi Dave, I did some looking a little bit. We haven't had a lot of time to really discuss a lot of like general topics, but I did find a bill that may be some interest. It's House Bill 1333, and the Senate companion bill is 5234.
What does it do?
And it's a bill to establish a system-wide credit policy for AP exams. since most of these students, well, they're obviously all in an AP class right now, but they've also taken other AP classes. They kind of have a lot of firsthand experience with the test, with the classes, and it sounds like it's a total bipartisan bill. I know Standby, I think, is the House sponsor.
Okay.
Um,
Representative Standby is one of the youngest members in the House from Puyallup, and she's also interested in the bill we worked on last year.
Yeah.
Lawrence probably recalls. That sounds quite interesting.
So we'd we'd have to explore more. It sounds like it's trying to set up what a 3 on the AP test would get you at the different schools, and setting a standard. It actually sounds like a council is set up to do it, or it's a little confusing.
Okay.
To get more detail.
Well, you clearly have access to the introduction sheets, and so what I would suggest is you take a look at that and maybe pull up a couple other ideas. It might be good to have 1 or 2 sort of backup bills that we can track in case if this becomes the one you're most interested in. But should it fail to pass the first cutoff date, then we'd still be business with something else. And that's another thing I should probably mention. The legislature imposes deadlines on itself so that because they have literally thousands of bills that they're going to be confronted with. By the end of this session, I should have looked up the numbers from last year, but by the end of this session, there'll probably be, I bet, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 bills will have been introduced. So it's very difficult for the organization to process all of that without imposing some kind of structure or parameters around the process. So what they have done is establish deadlines, and these deadlines occur, and so the first one is coming up in February. I think it's the 16th, and that is the day that all policy bills must be out of their respective policy committees. If a bill isn't out of its policy committee, then it's considered dead, and the legislature can't consider it any longer. But there are ways around that, which we can get into later. But that narrows down the field of bills. And so what I'm suggesting is maybe we pick a couple of bills that are interesting, so that if one of them does not meet this, does not advance prior to the cutoff, then we still have something to watch.
Are you familiar with I just heard on the news this morning a bill that's being introduced about background checks for guns, that people that have been denied a gun ownership, if they try to get a gun, the bill's supposed to impose some sort of requirement on the police to investigate.
Right. I heard the similar report that's this morning on the radio, but I'm not familiar with the bill. But we can track that down as well.
I don't know if you guys had any interest when I mentioned that. Was there any kind of reaction you had to it?
I
Sounds
feel
interesting.
like we could agree on that.
Yeah.
I'd like to read it.
I'd like to read it for it.
I'll try to find out the number and let you know. James here, our big
It's
guy.
actually been
In general, what do you think that's?
Yeah.
I feel like.
I think the double.
It's crazy.
I can look into the number as well, and you can send it to you, Mr. Lawrence, and then you can add that to your list of potential.
Do you have any idea what's going to happen with the fully funding of education? Like, everything I see says that there's a gulf between them and there's just no bridge.
I wish I knew what was going to happen. I could probably retire if I knew the answer now. But I think there is a division between the parties. There has been a group working on that all interim, and I don't think they've made a lot of progress. They're going to have to resolve it somehow pretty soon. The session, as I mentioned, I think a few minutes ago, this year is 105 days long, but they could go into what's called special session if they don't resolve some of the critical items they have to address, like the budget. And in the budget is this education piece. So it is widely expected that this year the governor will have to call the legislature back into special session, perhaps multiple times, in order for the legislature to finish its business and approve a balanced budget that includes enough funding for education to satisfy the state Supreme Court. So it's going to be a somewhat tedious and long year. The deadline for the legislature to get this budget work done is July 1st. And there are a lot of people that don't think they can meet that deadline, but that is the end of the biennium ends at the end of June, state biennium. So they have to have their next budget in place by the 1st of July. And we will see if they can pull it off. I hope they can, because I have hopes, like many people around here do, of taking a little bit of time off after session and doing some traveling. So the big question you hear around here is, have you purchased your tickets for July 2nd or 5th to go somewhere? And most people that are working around here have not been able to do that because we don't have any certainty that the legislature is going to be done. And I don't want to leave town and leave my clients unrepresented if the work here isn't finished and these folks have gone home. So,
You guys have any general questions?
I was wondering if you're working on any bill, or you're working on helping pass a bill that you'd like refer or like recommend to us that we should follow. Is there anything that interests you?
well, there are a couple of bills that interest me, that I have clients that are interested in them also, that relate to policies that would encourage further utilization of electric vehicles for the electrification of transportation. And that may not be that exciting to you all, but I think that's kind of interesting. And we have a carbon emission problem in this state, and we're a little bit unique here because most of our emissions are from the transportation sector of the economy. We have electric generation base that is hydropower, and it doesn't really emit any CO2. So we're unique in that regard, but we could do more to reduce carbon emissions here if we would electrify more of the transportation sector. So there are some proposals floating around that would address that. I'm not sure that's quite as exciting as either the background check bill or the AP bill that you mentioned earlier. That's something that's pretty interesting to me.
Are you guys interested in electric cars?
I was.
That's cool.
Flying cars.
They might be. It might be interesting to at least, if you gave us the bill numbers or something, we could.
Okay. I'll pass along bill numbers. They have not all been introduced yet, but there are some in the works. One that is sponsored at the request of the city of Seattle that has been introduced. I'll send that up to you. Are you planning a trip down here this year?
Yes, we are. And
I just want to know if that's my.
that date,
Okay.
Derek,
Am I gonna?
anybody have that calendar with them?
what calendar?
You asking there?
What day's
What?
the trip?
You know, that's my kid.
Oh,
I think the date is in early March.
You know what?
Yeah.
Early March.
Okay, wait for this little.
That's fine. I don't need the exact date or anything. I just I want to be,
I'll email it to you. Yeah.
yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Awesome report.
Just keep do it. Hey, do you know Mike Burgess by any chance?
I do know Mike Burgess, yes.
Good man. We met him.
March
And
8th.
also, Tucker is a former student there in the class, is an intern again this year in the house, and I'll probably invite him to join me for one of these conversations the next couple of weeks.
Tucker Bronfman.
Tucker? Nice. Oh, really?
Sweet.
You know,
It's March 8th is our trip.
Okay,
I haven't seen Tucker.
great. So we're about out of time. Any last quick questions? So next time, I want to spend a few minutes, we will nail down the bills that we're going to look at and work on, and figure out what our next steps are relative to each of those things. I look forward to working with you guys.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Today.
Have a good one.
Bye.